it's time for us to get going, Daisy. So if you'd like to introduce yourself and go ahead,
Mhm.
please feel free.
So, my name's Daisy. I'm the Climate and Nature Officer at Frampton Cotterill Parish Council, which is in South Gloucestershire. And we're really lucky to have a very climate and nature focused council. So we've got this post, we've got a climate and nature committee, we've got working groups and lots of volunteers as well. So with that team, we've been able to do lots of projects on bats as well. I'm ready to go. I'm in my bat t-shirt and I've got my bat squishmallow toy with me, ready to get going. So I'll start talking to you now about different types of bats. I just want to start off with some bat facts. So, first of all, vampire bats. They have such a bad rep. They're known as this image here as being really scary, blood-sucking creatures who just want to go and suck the life out of anything they can find. But I see that as the Instagram version of the bat. The reality is this cute little guy. Look how cute. They're so funny looking and adorable. So vampire bats are not what they're made out to be in the media. There's actually only 3 species of vampire bat, and they're in Central America, so they're not in Transylvania like they're made out to be either. And they're actually quite considerate species. So even though they're made out to just drink loads and loads of blood and suck the life out of things and people, they don't really go for people. What they tend to do is go for cattle and they make a little nick in the rump and they've got an anticoagulant in their saliva. So then it just gently trickles out and they just lap it up. And they're actually quite considerate and very cute little things. So bit of debunking around the vampire bat there. The next one is many bats have sparkly poop. That's the reason for this big image here. I mean, don't go out looking for a rainbow glitter poop like that in the woods thinking you found a bat, because maybe that's a slight exaggeration. But 70% of species around the world and all of the species in the UK eat insects. So the reason they have a slight iridescent sheen to their poop is because of the wings of all the insects that they've been eating. So they have this iridescent feature to it. So that's the one way you can tell bat poop from rodent poop. So baby bats are called pups. And the crazy thing about baby bats is their size. So they're born at about a third of the weight of the mum. That's like a human giving birth to a teenager, which must suck. Because not only do they have to give birth to that size of bat, they then have to carry it around until it's big enough to fend for itself. So mama bats have a rough time of it. They can also do this really cool thing where they delay pregnancy. So the breeding season for bats isn't till the autumn, but they don't actually get pregnant until they wake up from hibernation. So they can actually delay the sperm hitting the egg until they're ready to be pregnant in the spring, which is such a cool feature that saves their energy over the hibernation period. Have you all heard the term blind as a bat? Not actually true. Most all bats can see. They have pretty good eyesight. It's kind of similar to ours, actually. They just don't rely on it. A lot of bats, especially the ones that eat insects, rely on echolocation, so which I'll go into in a bit more detail. But they don't actually use their eyes so much to find food, but what they use them for is to find roosts and to get away from predators. So they actually have pretty decent eyesight. They've also been described as mice with wings, but this just isn't an accurate way to describe them at all, because there's recent studies have found that bats are more closely related to humans than they are to rodents. So not mice with wings at all. They're also the only mammal that's evolved for proper flight. So there are things like this, the sugar gliders or the flying squirrels, but they don't actually fly, they only glide. So bats have uniquely adapted the ability to fly. It's the only mammal that's able to do that. They also have some crazy immune system, which means they can live for a very long time if they're not predated on or if other things don't get them, like climate change or habitat loss. There was a bat species in this country called the Brandt's bat, which was found to be 40 years old. I mean, that's not the norm. That's a very old bat, but it just shows how long they can live given the right conditions. The rough lifespan is probably more like 8 years old, but they can live for a very long time. I'm going to talk a little bit about bats around the world. We'll look more at British bats in a minute, but I just wanted to show you how vast the diversity is of bat species. So there's over 1,300 species worldwide, which is a huge amount. And they just vary so much in how they look, their specialities, their diets, their size. You've got something as small as the bumblebee bat, which is tiny, it's about 2 grams, and then something as big as the flying fox, which has like a 5-foot wingspan. So the variation in bats is absolutely massive. Their diets vary so much. So the majority eat insects, but there's bats that eat nectar, there's bats that eat fruit. So it's very, very varied. I just wanted to show these pictures as well of how different they can look as well. This tiny little Huron bat from Central America, so cute, white and fluffy. And then you've got the huge fruit bats. You've got this little pipistrelle on the bottom left, which is in the UK. And then this really funny looking guy, the Jamaican fruit bat, which has a very unique nose. They're just so varied in every way. And I just think it's so, so cool. So why do bats even matter globally? Firstly, they're an indicator species. So bats give a great indication of the overall health of the ecosystem. So if bats are doing badly, it's probably because the environment in general is not doing very well. So if bats are doing well, it suggests that there's good habitat, there's good sources of food, and the other species are doing well because it's this chain reaction. Like bats need healthy insect population in order to thrive, and then the insects need healthy plant biodiversity in order to thrive. So you can use bats as an indicator of what your general environment is looking like. They're also really good for pollination in certain areas, not so much in the UK, but the fruit eating and nectar eating bats are really important for pollination. So without bats, there'd be no tequila, for example, because they pollinate the agave plant. I don't care about that so much because I think tequila is disgusting. It's horrible. But what I do care about is chocolate. Without bats, chocolate would be doing very badly. So they're really important in seed dispersal for the cacao plantations. So that's the one I'm worried about. Tequila, I'm not so worried about. They're also really important for pollination for mangoes and bananas and different types of fruits around the world. So we need them as an important pollination and seed dispersal method. Bats are also amazing at pest control. Like I said, 70% of bats are insectivorous, so they eat insects. And we could reduce the amount of pesticides if we just increase the number of bats because they can control unwanted pests. We don't need the pesticides, we need more bats, but with more pesticides, less bats. So yeah, we need to focus on that. So there's all sorts of threats to bats. The biggest one probably is going to be habitat loss and urbanization. So bats are really sensitive to loss of habitat at the moment. So they lose out on, for example, in this country, areas of trees, areas of water sources. And then the increase of urbanization is also increasing light pollution. Light pollution is a really difficult one for bats because the majority of species in this country, at least, are very light averse. They do not like it. They can't focus when there's lots of light around, and they just can't seem to adapt to it. So they will move out when there's light polluting the area. There's a couple of species that have adapted quite well to light pollution. It's very uncommon though. So the common pipistrelle and the serotine have been known to use streetlights as all-you-can-eat buffets. So there's lots of insects going under the streetlights. So then they've actually adapted to go under them and eat them, eat the insects from the streetlights. That's not common though, and the majority of bats, especially in this country, will not go near street lighting with barge pole. One that's a bit contentious is cats. I don't want to tell everyone get rid of your cats. I love cats, they're great, but they are the biggest predator for bats in this country. What we kind of suggest to people is if you can, try and keep cats in when it's dawn and dusk. Easier said than done. Or put a bell on, same for birds, to try and reduce the amount, the chance of them catching the bats. Some cats have learned where roosts are and they'll wait outside and they'll swipe the bats as they're coming out. So that's a real problem for bats here. Climate change is another really big one. So take bats in this country, for example, that will hibernate. I've seen bats this year coming out in January, which is crazy early. It's meant to be around April time. That is so, so early. And it's because we get these warm nights and then, oh, they think it's spring. And they're like, oh, let's wake up. And they use all this energy to then wake up out of their torpor state. And then they don't have enough insects to eat when they wake up and then, oh, I can't replenish this energy, and then they die. So climate change is a big one for bats, and also the effect climate change is having on moths and insects is really having a knock-on effect on bats as well. It's just this kind of chain reaction. So climate change is a really bad one for bats. Not so much in this country, but for bats around the world, there's certain diseases that are killing them, some to do with diseases on their nose. So that's another impacting factor. So I really want to talk about more British bats, which is my favorite area. So we've got 17 species in the UK that are breeding in the UK, and then 18 if you count one bat, which is not breeding here. And they are amazing listeners. I think one of you, was it Andrew mentioned about the brown long-eared? One of you mentioned brown long-eared earlier. They're the best listeners. So they've got these massive ears, and they can hear a ladybug walking along a leaf. So their hearing is amazing. So they have all sorts of different foraging sites. They forage near rivers, gardens, lakes, and hedgerows, and will roost in trees and buildings, caves, and rock crevices. So different bats will favour different areas to forage and to roost in. So I briefly mentioned before that bats in this country and insectivorous bats use echolocation to find their prey. So they'll send out a bat call, which you can hear on a bat detector. So one of these, for example, a bit blurry. You can hear their calls on that, and that's them painting a picture of the world around them. So they'll send out a call, it'll bounce back, and they'll hear where the insect is. And when they found an insect, you'll hear this feeding burst. It goes, and that means they've caught the insect. I have a very, very scientific and video to show you about echolocation that will sum it up for you now. Hopefully you can all see this.
Izzy, do you have some sort of block on your screen? Because you're
Oh, can you not see?
right. Well, half of it is chopped out because you've got a big.
Oh no. Okay, let me
the
have a
big.
look. Let's have a look. Was it on every slide or just this one?
No, it's on all of them.
Oh no, is it?
One at the top of the screen and one at the side.
Oh,
I'm not
let's
quite
have a
sure
look at
what's
why that's
causing it.
happening.
I don't know whether it's.
Um,
I'm wondering whether it's not something from Zoom that is popping in, like the
oh,
photographs of people.
oh, maybe. Let me reshare a minute. Let's try again.
And if the video has sound, I can't hear any sound from it.
Okay, let's try again. Let's see. Try this. Is that any better?
Waiting for it to come up. Yes, you got rid of the one on the side. There's still the one at the top. Oh, it switched to the other side.
Oh,
Well, that's good for watching your video. And
is that better?
yes, much better.
Okay.
And there's probably a button or sorry, a radio cell. Yeah. Ooh, that's bad.
That's bad. Is
Yeah,
that worse?
that's good. No, that's much better.
That's good.
Um,
Okay.
and there's probably a radio button you need to fill in for the sound to come through.
Okay. Bear with me, everybody.
I think it's when you go into the share screen.
Let's see.
And then usually there's a button down the bottom for share sound. And whatever you did then, it's just blocked out the whole screen.
That's okay. It'll be gone in a minute.
Okay.
I can't see the one for sound. Not had that problem before. Oh, very annoying.
I think
Yeah.
when you go click the green share button, then up comes the presentation of all the windows you have open.
Yeah.
If you open the
Got
top
that.
left one, which the top left is your desktop. I think you can let the sound through on that one.
Okay.
And
Let's
then
try
you
that.
go from there to your presentation.
Okay, let's see if that works. Right. Can you see the presentation okay?
Yes.
Should we see if sound works?
Yep.
Stop this working?
Nope. No, you just have to imitate. You just have to imitate what they're saying, Daisy.
I'm not going to annotate that. It's basically about screaming out into the shopping center looking for something in a specific aisle. I will send it. I'll send a link to the little video afterwards.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, actually, I've got a lot of things with sound on that I wanted to show you.
Ah.
Because I want to show you some bat calls. we just pause for a second, I will try and get it to work because
Okay.
it would be really good if I could get the sound on to show you the back calls.
Yes.
Okay. Let's have a look. So,
Oh, in my screen, if I go into the second share screen, it says the sounds on the right. There's a bullet point under options that says share.
got it.
Okay.
Got it. Yay. Okay, so we should be able to do it now. Right. Let's start again. How's that looking?
Looks good.
Yeah? Can you see everything?
Well, yes. It's a changing feast. You seem to have blocks on the top of the screen that keep changing size, but never mind.
Hold on, I think I know why that is. Never had this happen on here before. What's my computer playing up? 1 sec. There? Is that good?
That's much better. Yes.
Yeah, okay, let's see if the sound works. Stop me straight away if it doesn't.
Yes.
Excuse me, where can I find acorns?
Let me see. Yeah, that's gonna be out 4.
Do you mind checking if those are organic?
There you go, that's what I was trying to show you. Very scientific. Just a video showing a little cartoon of echolocation, which I liked. Right, here we go. We're going to talk about a couple of the different species of bat in the UK. I won't go into all 18 because I will just talk at you forever, but I'll do a couple of different ones that we have. So the first one I'm going to talk about is the biggest species we have in the UK called the nocturnal bat. So I refer to this as the big, loud one. So it's the biggest bat at 40 grams, which isn't really that big, but it's compared to the other species. I have a model here. You might not be able to see very clearly, but it's the biggest one we have. It's one of the first one that comes out at night. So if you see one flying really high, it's sort of the time that birds are coming out and it's flying quite smooth. It's probably a nocturnal bat. They are heard at around 40 kilohertz on a bat detector, 20 kilohertz, sorry. So they've got a very low call. It's very low and loud. So even though it might not sound loud to us, we can actually just about hear it as humans, and usually we can't hear bat calls. So that's how loud they are in their own world. So loud, in fact, they have a special skill where they can switch off sound in their ear to give themselves temporary deafness, basically, to stop them permanently deafening themselves with how loud their call is. I'll show you what the call sounds like on a bat detector.
Nocturnal bat.
So it's kind of a slow, chip-choppy kind of sound that you would hear on a bat detector if you ever wanted to take one out and go look for a nocturnal. On the other end of the scale, we have a pipistrelle bat, which is this tiny little one here. And they're only about 5 grams, so they're the smallest bat that we have in the UK. But I called it the small but mighty one because even though it's tiny, it can eat 3,000 insects in one night, which is a huge amount. That's equivalent to me eating about 100 roast dinners in one go or 120 Big Macs in one go, which I don't think I would get very far with. So they can eat a huge amount. Again, great pest controllers. So the image on the bottom is of a visual image of the call. So there you can either listen to bat calls or you can see a visual call on a spectrogram. So a pipistrelle looks like this tick shape. And this is what they sound like. They're found at around 45 kilohertz on a bat detector at the loudest peak frequency.
Pipistrelle bat.
It doesn't sound hugely different to the nocturnal. It's a bit faster. I think it sounds a bit wetter, but a lot of people say it doesn't. Someone said it sounded like marbles going down the stairs, so you can make up your own mind of what you think the calls sound like. No picture for the 13. I am limited to the confines of Canva for royalty-free images, so we don't have a picture of 13 bat for this one, but it looks quite similar to the nocturnal. They are second biggest bat. They're quite big, and I know this one as the jazzy one. This is for 2 reasons. One, because they kind of dance around, so they get quite close to head level, and they'll be quite swoopy and bird-like. But secondly, they sound like a bad jazz drummer, so their call is very janky and jazzy, and they can be heard the loudest at around 27 kilohertz. Again, the bigger bats are found on a lower frequency. So see if you agree with me with the jazzy sound.
16Apr25.
You kind of hear that rhythm changing, doing its own sort of thing. And then we got the last one I'm going to mention is a Benton's bat. The reason I have this picture is because to me, the call sounds like a machine gun going off. So that's the way I remember it when I'm trying to ID. But in order to really know if you've got a Benton's bat, it's to do with water. So I also refer to it as the water one. Bentons almost exclusively feed off water sources, so rivers, lakes, and ponds, and they will skim the surface of the water and grab insects off the very surface. Their call is loudest around 45 kilohertz, but the call length is very, very varied. It's very long range. So the best way to ID them is actually see them on the water skimming the surface. I'll show you a video of what that looks like. It's a little blurry, but hopefully you could see there that they're actually skimming right off the surface and grabbing insects, which is so cool. That's the best way to ID them. I don't recommend shining a big white light at them because they're one of the bats that are really sensitive to light. They're a bit more tolerant to red lights. Again, you won't want to expose them too long to it, but if you could shine a more of a red-based LED at them, then they're not as worried. There's different ways you can help bats and try and get your local community groups, your local residents to help bats. Firstly, wildflowers. Wildflowers attract insects. The bats here all eat insects, so we need more wildflowers. Even better if you can get sort of night-scented flowers, so things like honeysuckle or different types of campion, because then they attract the night insects like moths, which bats do eat. So that's a great way. Even if people just put a little pot out in their garden, it would help. Again, I've mentioned this a few times, but going pesticide-free, pesticides get rid of all the insects that the bats eat, so they won't have anything to eat. And if you can stop using them, you might get more bats in your garden anyway, and then they can eat the pests for you and just create this more natural cycle. So we really need to stop using pesticides and reduce it wherever we can. At Frampton Cotterell Parish Council, we actually have a pesticide policy where we've almost eliminated pesticides. We're eliminated everywhere apart from very, very, very rare occasional use on sports pitches, which we're now working on totally removing that as well. So that's one of the best ways you can help bats too. Putting up habitats. So bat boxes are a great one. They might not use it every time. Sometimes they're quite stubborn and they don't go where you want them to go. They'll find somewhere else, but that gives them the opportunity to have more spaces. So putting up a bat box around 20 feet or above, somewhere a bit sunny, will encourage bats into your area. Putting in any size sort of water source is amazing as well. So people could even put in a little tiny tub of water, or you could have a big lake, whatever land and space you have, it will help bats. So the bigger spaces of water would maybe encourage Benton's bats to come in, that water bat that we looked at just now, but even smaller ones will encourage insects. So if we've got more insects, again, more bats, it's all about getting more food sources for the bats. Having more native hedgerows is a massive one. Our hedgerows are really on decline and we need more native hedging. Bats use hedging in a number of ways, so they tend to forage near hedgerows. Bats basically tend to prefer having a linear feature that they can bounce their calls off of because it gives them a shape of the world around them. So having more native hedgerows is a great way. So if you can identify anywhere in your parish or town where you can add more native hedgerows, that could really help bats and a number of other species as well. That's the great thing about bats. If you do things to help bats, you're going to be, by knock-on effect, helping all sorts of other species too. Turn off the lights. This is a big one. So bats need dark corridors, and we have to balance this with health and safety for humans as well. So certain areas need to be lit out to reduce risk for humans walking in dark areas, but there's different ways we can manage it. So you could recommend to residents that they turn the lights off in their gardens, or we'll have them on an automatic motion sensor just to reduce the amount of constant light going out. You can also, for street lights, you can have shade spill reduction put on the top. It's also better to have warm light. Red's the best, but I know people may not like having red lights, but they've trialed it in certain countries and bats do prefer the warmer or the redder lighting. But warm LED is better than the big bright white overspill street lighting that you can have. Because bats need these dark corridors, because as I said before, most of the species here are just really light averse. Another way is encouraging residents, community groups, yourself to sign up to the Bat Conservation Trust surveys. So they've got all sorts of surveys. You don't have to be an expert by any means. You don't have to even know anything about bats. They will show you what to do. There's simple ones, there's more experienced ones you can do. There's ones you can do without a bat detector. There's ones you can do with a detector. But they basically will take all this recording and put it on a big map, and it will help them see where the populations are across the country. There's lots of places you can borrow bat detectors as well. So I don't know about other places around. I only know South Gloss. I'm in this area, but in South Gloss, maybe in your area, it's worth asking. Lots of libraries will loan out bat detectors. Our parish council loans out bat detectors. So if they don't, it might be worth giving them a push to get that resource available to you in your area. Again, cats, just encouraging people to keep cats away from roosts during dawn and dusk if they can. Easier said than done, or putting a bell on, like I said before. Cats are a tricky one. There's a really good resource you might want to share with people in your area of how easy it can be to make a wildlife pond to encourage insects that will then provide food source for bats. This one's from Wildlife Watch. We've put a few of these in ourselves at Frampton, and they're really easy. You dig a little hole, put a washing up bowl in, put some stones and rocks in, and then nature does the rest. It's really easy. So I recommend the Wildlife Watch mini wildlife pond. Same with the Wildlife Watch, how to make a bat box. Hopefully you can find a less blurry version. I've just realized this is a little blurry, but I've made this one myself and I'm not the best with woodwork, and I managed it. So residents love making this one. We've done some workshops making these with local groups, and it's really popular. So this is a nice, easy, fun way to engage the community in the world of bats. The bit about the projects we've done at Frampton Cottrell, we've got quite into it and we've done a lot of trial things that we're happy for anyone to replicate. We'd love for people to replicate some of these projects. So one of the projects we got funding for was for an accessible bat project. So from the National Lottery Awards for All, we got funding to run workshops and walks about bats that were inclusive for deaf people, blind people, and had wheelchair access. So we started off with a workshop, which is what this picture is here. That's me and the sign language interpreter up at the front. We got funding for sign language interpreters, and then we got funding for visual bat detectors. So the ones I showed you earlier with the shape, we got funding for those visual detectors so deaf people could see the bat calls instead of hear them. And then we worked with the RNIB to work on creating Braille information about bats, and we also got an MP3 recording of all the different calls and translated some of the local leaflets into audible for people who were deaf, blind, and for anyone really. Anyone can use this. It's not just for this, it's for all, being as inclusive as we could. So it was just a trial of a project to see how inclusive we could be. We went out with a volunteer who did loads of the work on this. She was fantastic. She found some areas that were wheelchair accessible and had bats. So we were able to take people around and not get stuck by kissing gates or mud or that sort of stuff. That was a really popular project, and we've got a little bit of funding left to do another one in this summer. So we worked with the Centre for the Deaf, RNIB, and the Bat Conservation Trust on that project, and we're hoping that other people would like to roll it out too. And as part of that funding, we were able to purchase loads of bat detectors, so 13 of these audio bat detectors, and then also 4 of the visual echometer bat detectors, which plug into a tablet. We created a policy for these, so anyone can loan these out. We want as many people as possible to come and borrow wildlife equipment from us. So we've got a policy which we're happy for people to replicate, where people can just borrow this stuff for free, and it's been really popular and worked really well. We've, touched wood, not had any lost or stolen, and it's worked really, really well. We've also done surveys at things like Frampton Festival, where they've gone on our sites as a parish council, and we've just made sure that the events are not impacting bat populations too much, and tweaking things where we can if we found any sort of impact. So it's just kind of monitoring as part of this as well. I already mentioned we did some bat box making and installing with a local group. We've got bat boxes all over the parish now. We're going to put more up as well. We need to monitor them and get a licensed bat ecologist in to check them, because you can't check boxes unless you've got a bat license. I don't know if anyone here's already heard about the Community Nature Reserve project as well. It's really taking off around Bristol and South Gloss area. It's basically getting people to sign up their garden as a space for nature and creating this map of all the different areas for nature. This helps bats and beyond. So we're working with a local Frampton Cottrell nature group, and David, who works with us, who's done a fantastic job on this project. We've got about 60 odd gardens signed up now. So that's helping bats, hedgehogs, all sorts of species, basically, just doing something for nature in your garden. So I really recommend the Community Nature Project for your parish or town. We've also put a bunch of policies in. Again, you can steal these if you want. We're happy for people to copy and paste bits from our policies. We've got a biodiversity policy, we've got a bird policy, a bat policy, environment policy. We've got quite a lot of things to do with nature and environment, and we're always happy to share that information with people. We've also got a policy for the wildlife equipment loan, so that we're kind of covering ourselves a bit for that. So we've done a lot of work on these. We've also got a local climate and nature action plan. I think you had Matthew on here a while back talking about the local climate and nature action plans, which are starting to spread, which is really exciting. So we've got one of those and we follow that template. So I recommend the South Gloss guidance on local climate and nature action plans if you're interested in starting something like this. As part of that, we also got the information from all the surveys and people loaning out the detectors to create a bat map. So we've added more since this picture. We're trying to paint a picture of where different bats are around the parish. And we got a UE student, so a university student, to come in and help us with this. So they mapped the data for me. I love collecting data. I'm not so good at disciplining myself to process the data. So whenever I get someone who's willing to help me do that, I'm very grateful. So the UE student very kindly processed the data for me into a map because it was sitting in a pile for so long, because I'm more of a collector than a processor. Yeah, we're building the bat map really well now, so that's exciting. I just want to end with a few useful links for you if you want to look into this anymore. So the Bat Conservation Trust surveys link to the Wildlife Watch ponds and bat boxes. There's a link to different flowers for bats, like the night scented ones, and a link to 7 Wildlife Rescue. So 7 Wildlife Rescue have done an amazing thing for bats. They kind of specialize in bats, and they've got a bat flight cage in Chepstow where they rehabilitate and release, which is brilliant. There's a link to the policies that we have at Frampton Cottrell as well if you want to have a look, and feel free to pinch any of them. And also a show recommendation. It's not scientific, it's not educational, but there's bats in it and I really like it. It's called What We Do in the Shadows, and it's a fun show to watch. So I'll leave that link in there as well. But thank you for listening, and if you have any questions or anything, then yeah, feel free to ask me.
Daisy, well done. That was fascinating and full of all sorts of facts of which I had no idea. So thank you very much for stepping in and helping us out. And Stuart has already got his hand up. So away you go, Stuart. You're on mute, Stuart.
I keep doing that, sorry. I'll just say thank you for a very interesting and very enthusiastically delivered little talk. Two things really struck me. At the start, you said you had lots of volunteers. I was just wondering how you generated such enthusiasm. I think you've answered the question already, but I'd like to hear it.
Yes, so we're really lucky. We have got lots of volunteers now. We started off with none a few years back. We hardly had any. And then we had a couple of volunteers come forward, which really generated this. So we only started like with 3 or 4 really enthusiastic volunteers, and it spread from there. So, but what we did to generate more volunteers was run more events. And when we ran more nature events, not necessarily all bat events, like we've done lots of bat walks and workshops, but general nature events is where I've signed people up. So for example, the one that we signed the most people up in the beginning when we first started, we did a wildflower planting day. And on that day, when everyone came along, we had about 35 people come along, and I grabbed every one of those people and said, do you want to be a volunteer, and got them signed up. So that started things off. And then anytime we do any sort of event, I ask people if they will sign up to be a volunteer, and then they're on a mailing list. And once they're on that, I can keep them updated on what's going on, what volunteer events are coming forward, what opportunities there are. And it kind of grows from there. Also giving volunteers some autonomy and some projects that they can lead on seems to help. And just doing call outs in your parish. So you could say, is anyone interested in bats? Is anyone interested in running this sort of project? At the moment, we're trying to get more people to lead, which is harder. We've got about, I think we've got about 90 volunteers at the moment signed up, but it's more difficult getting people to lead on projects. that's what we're working on now. We've got a few key volunteers that are working on that. But yeah, what I would say is just run some events that you think people will be interested in, and then grab them when they're there and sign them up so you've got their email and get their permission. And then you can keep telling them what's happening, and then you get more people coming back. And then you get a core group usually. I mean, we have 90 volunteers. We don't get all 90 volunteers turning up to stuff. We get a handful of core people coming along usually. But it's just grabbing people when you have them at these sorts of events, I think is good. And using social media and doing call outs and just asking people for their advice and input is usually a good way in as well. But yeah, I'm happy to show you anything we've done. And if you want to have my email at the end, and I'm happy to share more info about that with you if you like.
Thank you, that's great. Another question. You mentioned the bat's immune system. It seems to be quite well known that they do have an incredible immune system, probably due to the natural environment that they live in. Yeah. But they're also implicated in the coronavirus. Have been implicated in many other human diseases. I was wondering if you could add a bit of truth to that.
Yes, I feel very sorry for bats about this because all sorts of animals carry diseases. Bats are able to carry diseases and not spread them because they have such a good immune system and high body temperature. So they can carry certain diseases without actually getting sick themselves. Things like coronavirus, I blame humans because we are encroaching on their area and we're spreading into their habitat and we're taking over their space. And then they get villainized as a result for spreading diseases to us. So a lot of the times it's not the bat's fault that these diseases get spread. They do carry these diseases, and it is possible for them to pass them on to humans. It's actually quite rare for them to pass on the diseases to humans, but as we've seen, it can happen. But for example, in the case of coronavirus, that was humans' fault. The bat was brought into humans' environment and it had carried that disease. So I think we need to look at our relationship with wildlife and the conflicts that we're creating with them, rather than villainizing the species for carrying something.
Okay, thanks.
What's the mode of transmission in that case, Daisy? How do they pass the disease to a human?
It would depend on what the disease is, whether it was airborne or whether it was, that would be a more common one. But then, because bats don't tend to bite people unless we actually go and catch them and grab them and do stupid things with them. They wouldn't come along and attack a person. It just doesn't really happen like that. So, I mean, if they were carrying something like rabies, for example, rabies is carried by certain bat species. Here it's very, 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 very rare. I think there's only been 1 or 2 recorded cases of rabies in bats in this country, but you still have to get rabies vaccinated if you were somehow bitten by a bat in this country, if you were handling it, even though it's very rare. So something like rabies would be through a bite. But then there's certain things that could be airborne. It would depend on the disease, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Welcome, Andrew, and your turn next, please.
Hi. Thank you very much for all of that, Daisy. I must admit, as an aficionado of the old television series back in the day, which some of us older people may remember, I used to have this voice, Adam West's voice, saying, "Quick, Robin, to the bat map." Anyway, never mind.
Yes. I missed that opportunity for a pun about
well,
Batman.
That's a free gift to you for your next presentation.
I'm going to steal that.
And they've got a soundtrack as well, of course. There we go.
Of course.
Meanwhile, back at the ranch, biodiversity net gain. We've been getting some advice from DEFRA about this, and I mean, just put a picture on what I was wanting to talk about. There are such things as bat boxes. This is available from the RSPB. That's what they look like. Looks a bit weird. Yeah. Obviously for the smaller animals, but there we go. I don't understand the science of it, but apparently, if you're a planning developer encroaching on wildlife habitats, having bat boxes as is not at the moment not accepted as something which is about a biodiversity net gain, but it's something obviously that's to be thought about. So apparently you can mention it, but we can't necessarily expect developers to put up bat boxes. So so that's a slightly negative bit of information.
Yeah, I recently came across this ourselves because we were putting in a planning application for a pathway, and we were looking at net gain for that. And as part of it, we were going to put in bat boxes and all these different habitats. They're like, oh no, it doesn't count, and you can't necessarily make it happen, and it doesn't count towards the net gain necessarily. So no, I think it should be, and it should be considered, and it'd be great if developers could put in bat boxes, or you can even have them inbuilt into buildings as well. It'd be great if that could become a requirement for new builds, and I think it should be, as well as like swift boxes, that sort of thing, and hedgehog holes. So that I agree with you, it should be made compulsory.
Just to clarify, for those that are not already aware, the planning rules in this country now require, in England anyway, if you're going to develop a site, that you have to end up with 10% more biodiversity and wild habitats on it than it started with. There's ways of dealing with that. But you can add in back boxes by all means, but it doesn't count towards your 10%. So we can recommend to developers that they think about it, but it won't help them with their 10%. Yeah.
Yes, definitely still put them in though, even if it doesn't count.
Yeah.
Very beneficial.
Sorry, there we go.
I've missed so many opportunities with that. I'm going to take that one as well. Maybe I should start every presentation with that song.
Right.
Gary, you've been waiting patiently. Could you ask a question, please?
Yeah, it wasn't actually a question, Graham. It was just I just wanted to share something that we were doing ourselves when it comes to bats, because we have a batscape strategy, which I've added in the chat a link to, because we've got quite a few endangered species around here. So about a year ago, what I did was I approached the local kind of like, it's called the Brunel Shed, which is this woodworking group, which is tend to be generally known as a men's shed, but they get funny when you call it that because they invite everybody along. So I invited them, and I took that actual plan, Daisy, that you just showed to make a bat box, and they've got an Alzheimer's group, and they thought it was great for them to work on them. So they've been producing bat boxes for me, and they produced about 30 bat and bird boxes last year, and we've been spending the last couple of months sticking them up all around the parish. So it's a really good resource that we can go to and say, like, can you build us loads of these bat boxes? And if you do, then we can put them up all around the parish, and we've been doing that.
That's fantastic. And what a great way to be inclusive as well, by going to the Alzheimer's groups. That's bringing in an element of society that might not have been involved in anything to do with nature beforehand. So that's a great way in so many ways for bats and for the community. I'm going to look into that myself. That's a great idea. And did you just use the Wildlife Watch guidance as well, the ones that we had on the screen earlier?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. I think that's the one I used. There are a few. I mean, if I could share, I'd share a photo of the group with their bat and bird boxes, all looking very proud at the town hall as they handed them over. So, they loved it because it's a very nice job for them to just get on with when they're looking for something to do. So,
fantastic. I'm gonna have to look at doing that in Frampton.
Okay, well, I was just checking my notes to see if I could make an announcement about next week, but I'll do that later. Let me just check if anyone else has any questions for you, Daisy.
Something in the chat. Andrew said that they've successfully persuaded developers to put in bat tiles. Oh, that's brilliant. The bats love roosting under certain types of tiles, so I'm assuming it's those sort of tiles that bats can use to roost in, which is really great that you've managed to get that through. Because that's something we really need to consider bats, because they are all protected in this country. Every single species of bat is protected by law. So as town and parish councils and communities, we have a lot to think about when we do any sort of project or development, and recommending developments for approval. Stuff like bat tiles is a great way to support bat populations.
So it would seem if you've got bat tiles or you've got a bat box on your house, is that the preferable place for them rather than, say, out in the woods or something where they can be away from light and away from noise?
I mean, it's good to have a mix because we've got so much urbanization going on. If we can provide spaces for the bats that can tolerate slightly more urbanized environments, like the common pipistrelles, for example, it's great to have it on the house as well. You would want both, because there's some species that will solely only live out in the woods and may only live in tree crevices and won't use a box anyway, but there's different species that may use a box. They're all quite fussy and they all like different things. So my advice would be do both, just so you please them all.
Right.
Well, there we go with Andrew then.
Yeah, one question. We've got a nature area which is quite near a very busy road. Is that a problem to try and encourage bats around there, or?
No, not a problem. So they tend to go over the line of the cars anyway. And I've done surveys all over, and I have found bats using the hedgerows along roads because that's a nice linear feature. A lot of times roads will have the hedgerows along the side, and bats will still use areas that have roads and cars. I mean, some bats won't, as I said before, some are fussier than others, and some species won't go near that, but you will get bats foraging near roadsides, so there's no problem encouraging them to those areas and just improving those sites, because you can see it as stepping stone as well. Bats have different species have different foraging distances that they travel. So even if it's part of their foraging route, even if it's not that they're stuck there, but if you can enhance that area for bats, even if it's a stepping stone, if you see what I mean, it's good for them. So yeah, do by all means encourage them. Yeah.
Yeah, another follow-up one. What about hedgerow management to encourage bats? Our hedgerows around here are flailed out of existence in the autumn, and I'm wondering what is that good or bad, or what should we do to hedgerows? What should we encourage for hedgerows?
So you want to get a mix is good, really. So flailing's not great because it encourages a very skinny lollipop style of hedge, and it's what everyone seems to do because it's the easiest way. If it's possible and it's not right on a road, to leave it to get nice and thick and dense is really good for bats. But if you need that management and need to thicken it up or make it a bit more dense, if it's already gone like a lollipop and it's not getting any thicker, what you can do is you can lay it. Laying it is quite good. We've got community groups in to lay some of our hedges because it thickens it up and then it's denser as it grows, but that will create a smaller hedge. So that's good in terms of attracting more biodiversity, but bats would also like a mix of some of the thicker, denser, thick hedgerows that you can get as well. But that's not always practical when you've got pathways and you've got roadsides. So hedge laying's a really good one for not just bats, but the species in general is good for, because it just really thickens up the hedge, and birds like using hedges that have been laid too. So you can get community groups in and volunteers, and they love doing hedge laying, and it's very fun. I like it as well. So that's a good activity for people and to get volunteers on board. But otherwise, yeah, you can thicken it up by planting. You don't want to do hedge laying, you could thicken up the flailed hedges by putting some more planting in there on the edge and just getting it a bit more dense.
Thank you.
On to Andrew Malafant, please.
Yes, just slightly bit more feedback on the planning. We had a sort of good news for bats, really. I think the authorities have increased the requirements for people to check out bat feeding areas when you're planning new housing developments. That's happened, I think, a couple of years ago. I knew that because we're doing a community land trust development, and the people putting the application in were slightly missed the deadline for doing the more up-to-date survey, so that we had to wait a bit longer for the planning to go through. But basically, sort of good news for bats. My own little anecdote is we did have which I suspect was a mating pair of bats on their honeymoon, and they investigated being in one of our outhouses, and they were flying in and out for a bit. But we're obviously it was just for the honeymoon only, because we decided not to settle. Probably we were too close. I don't know. But unfortunately, I didn't get to see them close enough to find out what kind of bat they were. But one of the British sources, presumably. Yeah. Okay.
Oh, brilliant. Bats do tend to move roofs, so they have different roofs different times of year. So that's
can't even remember now what time of year it was, but it was definitely two of them. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
they
brilliant.
were talking to each other. Yeah.
Oh, could you hear them?
Oh, they were chattering away. Yes, yes.
Were they? Brilliant. The social calls tend to be a lower frequency, and we can hear it, so they probably were chatting to each other.
Well, they had that overtone. I mean,
yeah.
I don't know if bats go on honeymoon, but that's what it sounded like to me.
Sounds like it.
Okay.
That's great. Thank you.
I'm just looking at Gary's picture of all the people holding back boxes in the set. That's which group is that, Gary?
That's the local Alzheimer's.
That is them. Okay.
That's the woodshop group. Yeah.
Wonderful. Oh, brilliant.
Yeah, that is.
That's
really
fantastic.
Good.
I'm going to be stealing that idea shamelessly. I'm going to.
Well, that's why I'm telling people. I want to spread the word, because it's been a fantastic job. Like you say, they get so involved, and it's great.
Brilliant. Well, we'll definitely look into doing that, because we've already got back. We're making habitat boxes at different sessions at the moment, but I'm going to see if we can do one with the. I don't think we have we do have a local Alzheimer's group, and we have a few different types of care homes and stuff. So I'm going to look into those. So you've given me some ideas. Thank you.
Do you have like a local men's shed kind of group?
Yeah, we do have. Well, we have one outside of our parish, and we have a men's chat group which have been building some boxes for us in Frampton. We're hoping to start a repair cafe as well. So there's all sorts of places we could go to build some, which will be exciting. Yeah, thank you for that idea.
Stuart, please.
Hi, thank you. I was just wondering, what would be your recommended course of action if you wake up in the night and find a bat in your bedroom?
So ideally, it's not, you're meant to have a license to handle them and rabies vaccination, but if you can, there's some really good guidance on the Severn Wildlife Trust and Bat Conservation Trust website. If they're injured, usually you can put gloves on and scoop them into a little box with a towel and take them to a wildlife rescue. But if they're flying around like crazy, that can be a bit more difficult. There's a helpline on Bat Conservation Trust, which you can call, and they give you advice where the most local wildlife rescue is, and they might come out and get it for you. If it's healthy and looks okay and it's flying around, just open a window and try and
It was
out the window.
perfectly healthy, and I did open the window, and
Did it go out?
eventually he found his way out again.
There you go. That's the ideal. You did the right. That's the ideal outcome. If you just open a window and eventually they go out. It's when they're injured it gets a bit more complicated, and you've got to try and get them to be rehabilitated. But yeah, you did the right thing. Just open the window and hope for the best. Is what the first point of call.
Okay, thanks.
Well, I think
I've
we've
not had a
come.
bat in my house before, so hopefully it's good luck.
Yes.
I don't know.
You will, Cinderella. Yes.
Yes, next. Birds and bats, let them all in.
Well, Daisy, thank you again so much for a very lively presentation. It was fascinating, educational, and very interesting. And
thank you.
again, you've saved our life on coming in at very short notice, so thank you. It was
Always have to talk about bats.
So let me just make an announcement about next week. We've got an education nature park. So do please all come along and find out what's happening there. And thank you all for your time this week. And again, another thank you to Daisy, and see you all next time.
Yeah.
Take
Thanks very
care.
much. That was great.
Good to see you all. Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Yeah,
everyone.
bye.
Thanks for having me.
All the very best.